Kingpins don't usually only float around in the Marvel Universe. It also exists in the real world, and one of the most gruesome of them is El Chapo. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera, better known by his stage name El Chapo, was born on April 4, 1957. He was a Mexican drug lord and a former head of the Sinaloa Cartel, an international criminal organization. He was regarded as one of the most potent drug dealers in the entire world. Guzman was nurtured in a low-income agricultural family in Sinaloa where he was born. He was subjected to physical abuse by his father and got his start in the drug trade by working with him as a young adult to produce marijuana for local traffickers. Welcome to the channel, to the world of everything related to the global underworld. Let's learn more by diving in. Ready? Let's go. By the late 1970s, Guzman had started collaborating with Hector Luis Palma Salazar, one of the country's emerging drug lords. In order to transport drugs from Sinaloa to the United States, he assisted Salazar in planning the routes. Later, he oversaw logistics for Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, one of the country's top kingpins in the middle of the 1980s. However, in 1988, after Gallardo was apprehended, Guzman established his own cartel. Guzman controlled organizations that produced, smuggled into, and distributed massive amounts of cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, and heroin throughout the United States and Europe, the two continents with the highest consumption rates worldwide. He did this by developing long-range tunnels near borders and distribution cells, which allowed him to export more drugs to the United States than any other trafficker in history. Guzman's leadership of the cartel also brought great riches and power. Between 2009 and 2013, Forbes named him as one of the most influential individuals in the world, and the Drug Enforcement Administration believed that he was comparable to Pablo Escobar in terms of influence and fortune. Initially apprehended in Guatemala in 1993, Guzman was later extradited to Mexico, where he was found guilty of murder and drug trafficking and was given a 20-year prison term. In 2001, he broke out of a maximum security federal jail by paying off the guards. Drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who has a history of breaking out of prisons in Mexico, is currently being held at a federal facility in Florence that is thought to be escape-proof, where violent inmates have killed an enemy and one inmate went so insane that he bit off both of his pinky fingers. Guzman, 62, was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years on July 16th and arrived at Administrative Maximum U.S. Penitentiary, or ADX, in Florence on July 19th. The drug lord's detention at the most secure jail in the country, also known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, has renewed interest in a facility that some have criticized as a breeding ground for mental illness. He joined some of the most renowned criminals in the country who are already incarcerated there, including Ramsey Youssef, Terry Nichols, and Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who carried out the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. As a prisoner, Guzman has proven to be cunning. He was brought out of a high-security Mexican jail in a laundry basket in 2001. He managed to escape from the Altiplano jail in central Mexico in 2015 by hiding under his shower and riding a motorcycle through a mile-long tunnel that had been constructed by hand. He continues to communicate with just about anyone, and it's clear that the federal government is worried that he'll relay communications concerning drug smuggling. He will therefore experience tremendous isolation, according to Dr. Terry Coopers, a psychiatrist who wrote a book about the effects of prolonged solitary confinement at Supermax. No one has ever escaped Supermax in its 25 years of operation. According to a 2012 class action complaint against the U.S. Bureau of Prisons, prison inmates have either received diagnoses of insanity while detained there, or their pre-existing mental disease has gotten worse. The lawsuit asserts that inmates have been known to continuously howl and thrash against the walls of their cells. After being given a life sentence, El Chapo, 62, arrived at the facility 2 days later. He joined other well-known criminals such as the Unabomber, a conspirator in the Oklahoma City bombing, and the 1993 World Trade Center bomber. At the ADX, all 400 convicts spend 23 hours per day in soundproof cells, followed by 1 hour of intensely monitored rec time. They are shackled and handcuffed as they participate in their supervised hour of recreation time. There is a very restricted form of television available, and phones are prohibited, meaning black and white recreational, religious, and educational programming. The cell's furnishings are all built of stone and are fixed to the wall or floor structurally. A little pad serves as the mattress for the concrete bed. A small concrete stool is molded to the floor, and a few tiny shelves protrude from the wall next to their in-cell sink. Every cell is built with the goal of getting rid of dangers. Some cells feature showers to further reduce contact with guards, although they are timed so that the flooding is seldom a concern. If the toilet is obstructed, it turns off. The sink has no faucet. Jeffrey Lichtman, one of Guzman's trial lawyers, claimed that the circumstances at Supermax constituted to greater torture. It's very terrible. Even Robert Hood, a warden at Supermax from 2002 to 2005, had unpleasant things to say about the prison. This wasn't made with humanity in mind. I believe that staying there day in and day out is worse than dying, he declared. After two Aryan Nation inmates, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, murdered two correctional officials at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, on the same day in 1983, the Supermax facility was constructed. After taking a shower and being led to a cell, a prisoner handed Silverstein a shank, or prison dagger, and Silverstein stabbed the officer Merle Klutz 29 times. A different prisoner gave Fountain a shank that afternoon, and he killed Officer Robert Hoffman by stabbing him. A more secure prison was being studied for several locations. It ultimately came down to economics, according to Hood. The land for the prison was granted by Florence. That is the real cause, according to Hood. Silverstein was dispatched to Supermax after it was finished in 1994. In a 2014 study by prison monitoring organization Amnesty International titled Entombed, Isolation in the Federal Prison System, Silverstein was reported as saying, "Though I know that I want to live and have always been a survivor, I have sometimes wished for death." The majority of the 400-plus prisoners at Supermax spend 23 hours each day alone in their 7 by 12-foot reinforced concrete cells. Huge 12-gun guard towers stand watch over the prison. According to the Amnesty International study, the cells include a solid outside door and an inside barred door, which adds to the prisoner's sensation of isolation. Because most cells contain a shower and a toilet, convicts rarely need to leave their quarters for meals. Prisoners also eat all of their meals there. Concrete beds and a tiny desk stool are included in the furniture of the cells. Bed mattresses are thin. There is a window in each cell that is 42 inches tall and 4 inches broad. However, there are no mountain views. There are radios and black and white televisions in many prisons, both of which have religious and educational programming. Prisoners and guests are always kept apart by a glass screen during all visits from the outside world. In the disciplinary unit of Supermax, there is a 4-cell wing known as Range 13 that is extremely guarded and has almost no inmate contact. They receive one 15-minute illegal phone call per month and are constantly monitored by cameras. According to the Amnesty International study, Yusuf spent more than 7 years residing in Range 13. Jack Powers, a former inmate of the Supermax, spent almost 10 years there, according to the class action lawsuit. He bit off both pinky fingers, severed his earlobes, removed a testicle, and sliced off his scrotum. Although the lawsuit is still continuing, it has resulted in changes for inmates' mental health. Guzman's new residence is unquestionably one of the Range 13 cells, according to Hood. He predicted Guzman would be a very obedient prisoner who, over the years, as he plans to escape, will become friends with officials. To me, there is no question that he will attempt to flee. His task, as far as it goes, is to leave. Hood remarked, "I believe he'll test the system. Guzman's fortitude, if not his sanity, will be put to the test by his near-total isolation," Cooper said. He claimed that although he cannot foresee how Guzman will be affected by solitary confinement, long-term isolation causes fear, paranoia, compulsive habits, irrational fury, and despair in the prisoners. According to court documents in the class action case, the BOP has established new programs to cater to the requirements of Supermax inmates and has sent scores of mentally ill convicts to other federal prisons. Supermax is still an extremely risky prison despite its rigorous security measures. Guzman, who oversaw the formidable Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico, won't be the only drug lord at Supermax, a prison where rival gang bosses have clashed. Mexican Mafia prison gang head Manuel Tati Torres, 64, was stomped and beaten by gangland boss Richard Chuco Santiago and an accomplice on April 21, 2005, leaving him with 18 fractured ribs and a damaged skull. His closed eyes swelled up. Torres's wounds caused his death. Though the exact length of Guzman's isolation at Supermax is unknown, there is sufficient evidence to assume it will be a considerable amount of time. In addition to his term, Guzman is also subject to special administrative measures, which according to Hood will practically require his total isolation in jail. According to a 2013 BOP study, 174 Supermax convicts had at least some of their solitary confinement time in Florence prison, ranging from 5 to at least 19 years in a row. There are indeed crazy and insane prison situations for El Chapo, let alone a normal convict. Trust when it is said the average man will go insane and die of solitary loneliness. Thank you for watching. Follow for more.